Data. It is the foundation for what will be the mechanisms to achieve your vision for Saudi Vision 2030, which is to diversify the economic sectors of this great kingdom, but also to drive digital transformation of the entire nation. And digital transformation from AI, biometrics, robotics, machine learning will be powered by a data infrastructure, which, as Ahmed described, is the transfer of data with value. Data is the new oil, and as a nation that has built its prosperity on oil, today we're going to take you through a journey of how this will be your new oil powered by blockchain technology. Because we live in a world with so much data. Every day, there are 306.4 billion emails generated across the world, 500 million tweets, 95 million photos, especially generated by young people on TikTok and Instagram and every other social media app. And did you know that over the last few years, 2 years, 90% of the world's data has been created? This is going to continue to grow as we live in a world of interconnected devices, an Internet of Things where everything we touch and interact with will be collecting, generating, and sending data. And all of that data has value if you can unlock its power. Today, I want to take you on a brief journey through the history of data and why this is so important to humanity's future. Talk to you about how the BSV blockchain in particular is unlocking and igniting the power of that data, and give you a preview of some of the exciting applications that are happening on BSV around the world and that you'll hear from today. I want to thank you for joining us on this very important journey, which I think will really be critical to the vision of a Saudi Arabia in 2030. Data comes from the Latin term datum, a thing given. Data gives us many, many things, and humanity has spent many centuries trying to collect data. In 19,000 BC, the first known markings of data are the Ashango bone, which is an early form of tallying through notches on an animal's bone. And then we had ancient collections of knowledge on cuneiform, on tablets, and other forms of ancient libraries. But it wasn't until 1646 that the actual word data saw its first published use in an English book in the United Kingdom in London that was by Henry Hammond about weakness and sin. It's derived from dare, a thing given, and datum. But now it is considered a fact given or granted, and we often use it for calculation. And in this particular book, Henry Hammond actually led to the next development of data in 1663, where John Grant in England conducted a series of recorded instances that are the first known tables looking at death casualty rates in the city of London, so that they could actually predict what could improve life expectancy by looking at what were the statistical analysis of what caused death. So it's the understanding of data not just for its raw purpose, but gaining value out of it that marked humanity's first foray into extracting more value out of our data. And from that casualty book, he published this book of observations about the varying death rates between genders and also predicted life expectancy. That was very valuable to the primitive doctors of that time. And then data calculation took another big step in the United States, across the pond, as we like to call it in the US, where in 1880, the US Census at the time started revealing a problem. There was too many people, more data that could be collected through the primitive means of that time. So in 1890, a gentleman named Herman Hollerith created this, the Hollerith desk, or what was known as the first tabulation machine to more efficiently count punch cards. The first effort to create a more automated means to collect, count, and process data. Then we got digital in 1928 when Fritz Fleumer invented the magnetic tape for storing data, which is a precursor to CD-ROMs and the servers and memory chips we have today. In the 1960s, we took a big leap into the concept of a virtual, connected world, where American computer scientist Joseph Carl Robnet Licklider envisioned what he called at the time an intergalactic computer network. Sounds very Star Wars, but really what he was thinking is, how can we have a network where data and programs can be accessed, as he said, by anyone, anywhere, at any time? sounds quite familiar to today's internet as today's world as well of cloud services. And this was the precursor to the internet and cloud computing, which started with what is called ARPA, the Advanced Research Project Agency in Washington, D.C. in the United States. And of course, we know that data emerged into the internet world with the 1990s when Sir Tim Berners-Lee created the concept of hyperlinks and hypertext to enable data sharing across the world in what is today the World Wide Web. A data network so vast, we had to create new tools to search, such as when Google Search launched in 1997. I remember using it for the very first time there back in the 1990s and wondering, what does this crazy name actually even mean? So today, our data storage has evolved from what are servers in physical rooms to the cloud, which in the beginning, when I was a technology lawyer, which I was for about 21 years, my clients were very concerned about, is it safe, secure to move data to the clouds? My clients all over the United States, big corporations would say, we need to negotiate with Google or Amazon about some protections for moving our data to the cloud. And we're seeing the same thing with the next evolution of data storage. Blockchain, storing and unlocking the power of data through a distributed means, not just in one server, not just in the cloud controlled by one company, but by many, many nodes. And I want you to understand today that blockchain is just plumbing. You hear about a lot of the excitement of blockchain with investments and digital assets and cryptocurrency. We view it as infrastructure, the data plumbing that will power a world. Just like today, you don't really think about what happens underneath the plumbing of the internet. And it solves several problems that we have in today's data world. One, data creates inefficiencies when there are a lot of intermediaries. Like in today's payment systems, when you want to use a payment or credit card, there are many people involved in the system, from the card issuer, the bank, the merchant accounts, the merchant acquirers, to you, the ultimate card holder, who are all transferring data to each other to validate a payment, process it, slow down the process, and take a fee, cause expense. And so data systems now are inefficient because they involve many intermediaries in the middle. And with customs, for example, tracking, you have a mess like this, where if you're tracking the progress of goods and deliveries across the customs process, you are tracking all of these participants, and they all have intermediary roles. Data also creates a problem with data silos. So many of our organizations and industries keep data in different data sets in different locations. And just like you would have maybe 5 different flash drives trying to figure out where's a file and is it synced to the current version of the file on another flash drive, that is a problem we have with data silos across the world that blockchain can really address. Finally, another problem is private databases, which is what most people use today, are not publicly accessible or verifiable. You have to trust the maintainer of that database. And if they want to cheat, create fraud, such as the Enron scandal by creating fake sets of books, it's doable and it's hard to catch until it's too late. Now, not all data belongs on a public blockchain, but one of its key advantages is having a data set that is maintained on a ledger publicly that everyone can access and verify that certain data existed at a date and time in history. And therefore, you can detect whether the data has been changed. That unlocks a lot of power. And so what we have today, for those of you who are learning blockchain new on the journey, is instead of keeping data by one company, one party, a distributed means. So imagine if we have a world, instead of just this one table here in the front maintaining the data, and if they want to play around with it, they can, every table in this room represent nodes on a network around the world who all have, maintain, and can verify the accuracy of the transactions and data on the ledger. It's much harder to cheat because you need the consensus of a majority of all of the tables in this room or the different nodes to actually update or change the ledger. And by providing that publicly, you have other attributes. These are what we think are the key attributes of a true blockchain. You hear about a lot of distributed ledger projects these days, such as Hyperledger, which has a purpose, but in our view is not a true blockchain, which needs to be public with a global distribution of data, You don't need someone's permission to use it as you do with Hyperledger. It also has transparency. Because the ledger is public, you can still protect the privacy of someone's information or their identity, but the fact that data exists at certain moments in time is publicly verifiable. And that creates a lot more prosperity for honesty. In addition, because it's difficult to change, it's immutable, not changeable. You can trust the data once it's been put on the chain. And at scale, you need to have it fast and low cost so that we can actually manage lots and lots of data on the chain. Two of the key blocks of virtue for blockchain are honesty, efficiency. Honesty because the ledger is publicly accessible and difficult to cheat, therefore to encourage more honesty in the world. And efficiency because it eliminates all those intermediaries I talked about. Instead of all of those parties in a supply chain having to update their own database and making sure the record of the movement of the products is synced across all databases, what if everyone's looking at the same public set of data at the same time? That creates more efficiency. What does this have to do with BSV? Well, there's clearly many blockchain projects and attempts across the world. And as you learned today, we are delivering something that other blockchains have failed to deliver, which is scaling and therefore unlocking massive power. Why is scaling important? Let me take you back to the early days of the internet, for those of you who are old enough to remember in the 1990s. I remember getting my first email accounts at the time, and email and internet distribution was slow. Remember downloading MP3 music files. Very slow. Imagine had we kept internet protocol and the email protocols we used limited so that only 7 emails per second could be sent globally across the entire world by everyone. We would not have the email system we have today because your emails would get backed up. They would not send quickly enough. Now we live in a world where if you don't respond to my email or I don't respond to yours within a minute, people get frustrated, right? Because it happens so fast. Well, today, the internet capacity and the technology and hardware has scaled so that we send 2.4 billion emails per second globally because of scaling power. And that's what blockchains need to deliver if we want to make them exceptionally useful. And what BSV is doing is massively scaling to be what we believe is the world's most efficient distributed data network, not just for micro digital payments, but all forms of data applications. And as you'll learn in a session later this afternoon, we view its protocol as a data network protocol, which manages the communication between devices of data, just like IP protocol manages the communication of devices across the internet. And this will have a special relevance to IPv6, the latest iteration of Internet Protocol, which is taking a real rise in this nation, one of the top nations for penetration of IPv6. And we think it can create a better internet. Scaling has a practical value. How much it costs to use a blockchain network. If you have followed blockchains over the past few years, Ethereum a few years ago looked to be the blockchain that would rise as the dominant business one. However, it has faced significant scaling challenges to the point that its founders have acknowledged Ethereum 1.0 really cannot scale, and they have to replace it with an attempt at what they call Ethereum 2.0. And this is a direct correlation to the cost to send a transaction. If I want to send you an Ethereum transaction, including a token based on Ethereum, or to execute a smart contract on Ethereum, it requires the sender, the initiator, to pay a fee to the validators who operate on the network. Over the last year, Ethereum's gas fees, as they call it, have vacillated wildly from $16 to a high of almost $70 to recently about $34. That is far too high if you want to create a blockchain that handles massive amounts of enterprise or government-level data. Think about all the public sector data that you could manage that's too expensive at this scale. It'd be like paying $30 for every email you sent. People would not be using email at that capacity. Well, BSV, because we've scaled our blockchain so big, last year, the median transaction fee for at least 10 micropayments was 1/25th to 1/100th of a US cent. 1/25th to 100th of a US cent. That is almost free. Not quite, but almost free. It also means you can open up the capability to do microtransactions, micropayments of either digital rewards tokens or other payments, or small bits of data that may not be worth a lot in isolation, but that someone might pay a small amount of money for. And the fee is not always that low. It depends on the size of data you use. For example, if you were to upload a JPEG image file or a movie file, which is much bigger, you pay more. You pay for the size of the data, just like, for example, you pay to your wireless carriers for how much data you might use, for example, in a given month, or cloud storage. And so last year, the transaction fee for BSV ranged from 3/100th of a cent, this is the daily average, to a high of about 5 cents. Still very, very, very efficient in terms of cost as well as speed. It is this type of network that we think can power a better internet and unlock more power to data. So through an enterprise-class version of what's called our node software, BSV has demonstrated in testing the ability to hit 50 to 100,000 transactions per second. That software will get deployed on the main net of our network later this year once some further testing has been completed. The speed is fast, transaction fees are low. This opens up micropayments capability, but also big data capacity. Companies are already thinking about using our blockchain to create data marketplaces that can be accessed for the analytics sources you want for big data. We believe it's the most energy efficient of all the proof-of-work blockchains because you can handle so much transaction capacity for the energy. We also deliver on the capabilities everybody else wants for blockchain: tokens, smart contracts, IoT device management, and there are even some young startup developers working on the ability to do computation on-chain, which is not coming immediately, but I foresee that as a powerful use case in the future. It has the power of a public ledger, and that's why we're here to talk to you about it today. And scaling continues on our network. We're not done. This is a gradual process, just like scaling of the internet. We hit multi-hundred megabyte blocks a year and a half ago. Last year, the transaction processors raised their caps to 2 gigabytes. That's 2,000 megabytes per block on average every 10 minutes. We hit those comfortably last year. And just yesterday, while I was here, a block of 3.8 gigabytes was mined easily on the BSV network because the transaction processors recently lifted their caps again to 4 gigabytes of size. This is going to be critical as we start pushing out bigger packets of data on blockchains through the internet. Think movie files, think music files, other forms of content. So on the chain, you can write, read, own for consumers, and monetize data, and do all of these other functions that you see on the screen. And that's why we describe data as the new oil that's unlocked in its power by BSV, and something other people in the blockchain world really don't think about. It's an informational commodity. That's what data is, and what the BSV blockchain allows data to be. Until blockchain, there was not an easy way to access data publicly and a way where you can create value and add value to it and attach it natively with, let's say, a rewards token, a stable coin, or other means. So it is the informational commodity nature of blockchain that I want you to remember. And we want a world where this is happening, where you see on the blockchain below people transacting in either BSV, placing onto the blockchain all types of files, for example, social media files that people are uploading to Facebook and Instagram servers could live on the blockchain. You could actually take multimedia files, music, video files, place them onto the blockchain, which some entrepreneurs are already enabling for music on our chain. Healthcare data could be accessed and managed by placing it into blocks on the chain. You can have supply chain information that helps to track the route of goods across its journey. You can have court documents, legal documents, public records placed on chain, as well as the ability to code and auto-execute smart contracts. Once all of this lives on a blockchain and is publicly accessible, we can have a world where all of us around the world are interacting, accessing all of that data, and exchanging value for it in tiny bits, in large amounts, because it's all verifiable, public, and accessible. This is a really powerful world that can drive digital transformation. So on BSV, we're seeing a huge, diverse range of use cases already emerging. You'll hear from some of the companies today. This is just a description of everything, not just the things you think about like fintech, data integrity, cybersecurity, regtech, healthcare, and even big data and ESG compliance. We'll discuss a lot of that today. The scaling power of our network is already overtaking other chains. Over the last few months, we've been tracking it, and not every day, but on most days now, BSV represents over 50% of many of the leading chains. This diagram doesn't track every chain, but most of them, and on January 12th, for example, there were over 4 million daily transactions, mostly data, on the BSV blockchain, and that represented over 50% of the transactions tracked on this particular chart. So now let me talk to you about some of the applications that are actually happening on BSV, the use cases. Data integrity. Because the blockchain is publicly verifiable, you can ensure data, once put onto the ledger, is in fact true. There's a startup in the United States called Veridat, which is creating a service to do this, particularly for pharmaceutical companies that have to do clinical trials testing before they get approval of a new drug, such as a COVID vaccine. And therefore, sometimes there's instances of accidental mistake in change of the data or fraudulent changes when someone actually wants to try to defraud a regulatory body to approve a drug. They've created a system which takes behavioral testing data, sends it through data storage, but also through their system, which sends it to the BSV blockchain with a timestamp, a hash, digital fingerprint of the data, so that you could verify quickly this data set existed at this moment in time, and if there's ever a tiny bit of change, it can be detected. Because the data set is publicly accessible, even the regulators can look at this. So even in presentations to the FDA, they've been very impressed by the ability for the government regulators to access and verify the data. Enchain is one of the companies you'll hear from today. They have a platform dedicated to enabling trust in data called Kensei, which actually allows a company to not deal with the blockchain coding, but use their platform to send data or digital fingerprints of it to the blockchain so that you can verify whatever kinds of data you want to verify and have it ensured to be accurate as of that date and time. There's a company based in Austria and the United Kingdom called Company with a K, which actually just is in the middle of being acquired by the large Moody's company, where they have a product that does KYB, Know Your Business checks, which are necessary, for example, for banks and financial institutions before they open a new account. And they record a digital fingerprint of the data they pull for a new institutional bank client to the blockchain so they can prove to regulators later if there's a problem with that customer, let's say they're accused of money laundering, that they actually complied with their obligations to do KYC and can prove to the regulator, I did it on this date and time. So it's KYB on the BSV blockchain. We're working in the UAE with the University of Sharjah on a project to create an academic and professional certification tracking application on the blockchain. So students and academic institutions can verify the accuracy of educational certifications, as well as whether professional certification is valid as of a date and time. You'll hear from one of the founders of a company that's working with the Sindh Police Department in Pakistan to use the blockchain to track their enterprise resource data, for example, ammunition. What is the inventory in the police department at any given time? Because that's of public importance, and that can provide transparency to the public. That company is also behind a product called InvoiceMate, which does invoice tracking and management on the blockchain. So you don't have to be calling people saying, did you get my invoice? Why is it not paid? Everyone can see in real time the journey of an invoice and speed up the collection process. A company out of Norway is powering a solution to create the first triple entry accounting platform on blockchain, not double entry, but to create an added layer of accuracy by using the blockchain ledger as the third account entry, so that the parties involved in the accounting system have a third entry that can be verified. That company is also behind a supply chain tracking solution called Unisot, which delivers supply chain management integrated with SAP and Oracle supply chain system. And they track, for example, the journey of fish, Norwegian salmon, across its life from fish farm to wholesaler, distributor, and they collect little bits of data, such as what is the weight of the fish at a given moment? What is its temperature? To know that when it arrives, it is fresh and that can justify the higher payment, for example, that a sushi restaurant may want to justify the premium payments. And they're going to create a consumer application. So as a consumer, at the grocery store, at a restaurant, you can actually scan if you want to see the journey of that product and all of these data points, which they can then monetize down to a tiny, tiny level. Dominium, a company you'll hear from today, has a cargo tracking system for national ports, which they started on a private database, but they are migrating to the BSV blockchain. It's called Dominium Marine, tracking the delivery of goods from port into land. They've deployed it with the country of Sierra Leone as a test, as well as other nations they're talking to, and it's helped increase the ability to collect customs tax more efficiently. You'll hear also from a construction industry company that is creating an app called Bow.app, which is a super app to manage the whole construction process with data using the blockchain, including IoT devices that will help reduce, we believe, disputes in the construction industry because the devices can be reporting what's happening on the construction site in real time. A company in Australia has a IoT device data system that they're working with actually a mining company to take mining and exploration leases, tokenize them, make NFTs of them on the blockchain, record environmental and operational data on-chain to make the mining process more environmentally efficient. That's new, but it's exciting. That company's also behind Weather SV, which creates a big data marketplace for climate data. By having channels people pay for to record on an hourly basis, what is the weather statistics of Riyadh on today? That data lives on chain, people can pay to access it, it's not challenged, because sometimes people fight over climate change data, and creates a marketplace. They have 11,000 active channels and 270,000 daily climate updates. They're also working with an environmental consulting firm to take data from trees, where IoT devices are attached to the tree that is collected to the chain to record, for example, carbon sequestration data, and then are talking to a city in Cairns that I'm helping them with to develop a project we hope will create NFTs of the trees that you can adopt and pay for adoption of a tree, where the money goes to the city's fund to take care of the tree, and you get some value out of the NFT in the future. This can also reinvent how content creators are paid, such as Blaircast, which is a system for uploading music files to the BSV blockchain and allowing creators to be paid in real time for every stream or download of their content. Patient data, through a company in the United States, HR Data, is moving to the blockchain. They're trying to solve the issue of data being currently siloed in your pharmacy, in your primary care physician, in your dentist, all separated. And they've created a system where it's all accessible through the blockchain ledger, but the private data kept off-chain. But you as a patient can authorize through a platform they create in the middle, the EHR data utility, a pharmaceutical company or other company, a researcher, to access the data and pay you for it a small amount, as well as all of the other participants in the medical chain, the doctor, the pharmacy, who all participated in the collection of that data. You'll hear from VXPass and VX Technologies, which has a verified health record and credential system on blockchain. Its first deployment is to track COVID vaccinations and make them publicly verifiable, which is very important across the world on blockchain. They're gaining tractions across the world, including with the small African nation of Lesotho. Managing all this requires identity. Keeping track of all our ID, instead of having many different logins, people are working on blockchain-based ID management, including a Meta ID company out of China and the Maxon internet browser out of Asia, which is trying to create a uniform system where all your ID information for login to internet services is managed through a single source on the blockchain. Environmental compliance can be improved with blockchain because companies say they're environmentally sustainable, but how do you know? And so there's a team that's creating a proof of ESG certification data system where companies provide data that you can all look at on the blockchain, and eventually they'll stamp you and give you a certification stamp, which can be, for example, an NFT to verify, or at least you can check as the public whether the data supports that they're environmentally sustainable. And the small island nation of Tuvalu in the South Pacific is enjoying a blockchain journey of its own. This is a group of 8 or 9 islands in the South Pacific that are at risk of sinking because of climate change. Being forward-thinking, their government has already started the process to potentially have to move their people to a new landmass and decided to go on completely paperless, a digital society. They are creating the world's first national digital ledger, moving all government and citizen records to a ledger built on the BSV blockchain. They needed a chain, even for a small country, that could handle a lot of data at speed with public verifiability for low cost. That's why they're working with us. This leads to a future internet, which we're going to be talking about this afternoon, where we are proud to be working with the IPv6 Forum to formulate joint education about the combined power of IPv6, the latest iteration of IP protocol, and the BSV blockchain. Latif Ladid could not be here with us this week, but he sent this message as chair of the 5G World Alliance and the IPv6 Forum based in Luxembourg. He said IPv6 is good for blockchain in Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia is good for BSV and IPv6. We'll learn more this afternoon. And we were proud to sign this past week and announce a collaboration to bring this type of education to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. With MCIT and its Saudi Digital Academy, we'll be working together to launch the Kingdom's first blockchain academy focused on BSV to educate students, developers, business executives, and government leaders about the power of this blockchain and how you can begin the digital transformation journey to unlock the power of data. So that's my journey through the history of data and where we're going into the future. It's from Latin, datum, a thing given. And it's something that humans have always been fascinated about. Numbers etched on a bone. Knowledge collected in ancient libraries. Tables that calculated death to give breath to new life. Machines that count who we are. Magnetic forms of recording information that lead to the dream of an intergalactic computer network with links to a modern internet, a network so vast with data that we needed new tools to search. And in our digital era now, data, a thing given, is everywhere. Stored in servers, up in the cloud, and now distributed through blockchain. Combination of value and data into one, recorded through a distributed ledger of transactions, organized into blocks connected across time. Yet those blocks contain more than just payments. They also contain the one most valuable commodity of our digital economy, data and data infrastructure. A thing given to enable people to own, control, have sovereignty of their data, to transfer instantly value, information, technology across the world, transcending global boundaries, powering applications for enterprise, government, a universal source of truth that breaks down data silos and opens data transparency. Tracing products, health, the very sustainability of our planet, powering AI, machine learning, and the very future of smart homes, smart cities, smart communities, a smart world. Unlocked with massive scaling power, so many things given. With BSV, a new world of data.